From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, another featured speaker from that K-State Cattlemen's Day last Friday. From Select Sires, Lorna Marshall. We'll take a look at the latest advances in beef genetic selection and management. Then another of the 6 Kansas farm and ranch couples will be recognized as Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers later this week. Featured today, Mark and Eva Gardiner of Clark County. Then the latest edition of FSA Coffee Talk from the Farm Service Agency. Kitra Cooper will talk of several FSA grassroots roundtable meetings for you producers coming up around the state in the weeks ahead. And K-State's Charlie Lee will visit today about anthraquinone as a wildlife repellent on crop seed. All that here on Agriculture Today.
When a thunderstorm approaches, follow these safety tips. Lightning, known as the underrated killer, usually strikes the tallest objects, so avoid standing beneath trees or other isolated tall objects. Take shelter in a sturdy building. Remember, if you're close enough to hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. Help keep you and your family safe this severe weather season. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Well, a top official with one of this country's leading providers of cattle genetics says that the future is very bright for the beef cattle industry. She was one of the keynote speakers at the 107th Cattlemen's Day here at K-State this past Friday. Lorna Marshall is the Vice President of Beef Programs for Select Sires out of Ohio, and she is a K-State graduate, by the way. During her presentation, she talked about such advancements as molecular genetics, gene editing, embryo transfer, and a better understanding of observable traits in beef cattle that are helping to move the industry forward. And 2 of the challenges that Lorna harped on were management practices, especially labor involved in raising beef cattle, and consumers' demands to know how their beef is being raised. Agriculture Today's Britton Rucker caught up with Lorna right afterward for this conversation.
Lorna, you talked about genetics and reproductive trends in the global beef industry, and the speed of change is really increasing in this industry.
Yes, it definitely is, and it's been brought about by not only a lot of technological advances, but also the fact that a lot of that technology is available to us at a much more reasonable price. So we know that happens in every industry, but it's really allowed us to increase the rate of genetic change because not only can we change the genetics, but then we can recreate them at a much faster pace than what we've been able to previously. So generation turnover on both the beef and dairy side is going to really increase.
Right, and going right into that, genetics are really becoming more and more important.
They are. I think just with social media and all of the technology that we have available to transfer information today at a much easier pace, that what we do is becoming more transparent to the consumer, and it's going to force us to share information up and down the production chain with everybody that's a stakeholder in our industry. And the neat thing is that the technology is coming along that makes it easier to do that.
So in your presentation, you discussed some trends in the genetic field.
Yes, so one, genomics is really changing the genetics field because it allows us to really get an accurate prediction of an animal at a very young age. And so when we can describe those animals at a very young age, then we can decide how they should be reproducing or what they should be creating. And so particularly on the dairy side, genomic testing is a very high accuracy product at this point, and it's also becoming more cost effective, and so we see it entering the commercial dairy industry, and so that allows us to segregate those females based off their genetic value. And that's why we see the big trend in beef on dairy is essentially we can take the top end of those females, utilize sex semen, and create all the replacements that a dairy needs, and then we can put beef semen in the bottom 2/3 of those females and create a better beef product for our industry.
Now, humane animal treatment also plays a role in that.
Yes, so we talked a little bit about today about gene editing and some of those type technologies that today we don't have available in the U.S., but there are other countries that are utilizing those. And I think if gene editing does get adopted in the United States and approved, one of the first traits that you will see companies utilize is being able to remove the the horned gene, particularly from the Holstein population, because it will allow us to do something that's good for animals and will be seen as a positive by our consumer.
Right. And that rolls right along with sustainability.
Yes, so sustainability is another topic that we talk about a lot on both the beef and dairy genetic side. So we can do a lot of neat things in terms of feed efficiency, mature cow size. Water usage is huge. I come from a western state now, and we talk a lot about having to compete with a growing population and who's going to have access to that water. And so creating ag products that take less resources is going to be important.
Now, you also talked on the producer side that labor is really their main challenge.
Yeah. So if you were to poll all of our commercial cow-calf producers today that are a customer of ours, they would tell you their number one issue is labor. And the cool thing is that we can actually do some things from a genetic perspective that can make labor less of an issue for a commercial cow-calf producer. So whether that's creating cattle with calving ease, so they're not having to babysit those cattle during calving season, or just reduce the incidence of having to touch that animal. So good udders, good feet, health, I think, is going to be one of the big traits on the horizon. And if there's less treatment of that animal, that means they're getting touched fewer times. We can address a lot of labor issues, I think, with genetics.
Now, I'm sure technology plays a role in that. What does the future technologies in the beef industry look like?
I think it's going to depend on what segment of the industry that you're in. I think, honestly, RFID tags are going to allow us to capture all of this information and analyze it in a big data type situation. We continue to make advancements in terms of the fertility of particularly sex semen, and it's a huge player in the dairy world today. I think it's going to be a much bigger player in the beef world. Embryos, we're making lots of advancements in terms of the conception rate and the ability to make IVF embryos in a more cost-effective manner. So looking at lower quality females as simply a conduit to carry a much higher genetic value pregnancy, I think is something that we'll see in a lot of different segments of both the beef and dairy industry in the near future.
Right, and you talked about the beef on dairy trend. What are some trends in AI that you're seeing?
Yeah, so the two biggest and fastest growing markets for us on the beef side of the AI world would be, one, the utilization of American or U.S. genetics in Brazil on the Lorry cows.
Right.
And so South America is a huge market for us because they have cheap labor. They have a really high percent AI on their cow herd relative to the United States. And then the beef on dairy market's the other really fast growing market for us, where we're seeing a lot of beef genetics getting utilized on the bottom 2/3 of the dairy population.
Now, how big is that market?
Yeah, so that's an unknown, and depending on who you talk to in the industry, you're going to get different answers. It's probably going to result in somewhere between 2.75 to 3.5 million beef on dairy animals a year, based off the current rate of usage of beef genetics in dairy operations in the U.S. I think that may creep up a little bit more over the next couple of years, but we've made a lot of advances in that area recently. So, but you got to remember, they're not new animals to the system. They're simply replacing what used to be a Holstein steer.
Right. And people that don't know what the beef on dairy trend looks like, explain that a bit.
Sure. Yeah, so we talk about, we have this dairy cow population. We segregate them based off a really high accuracy, cost-effective genomic test, and then we're putting beef semen into the bottom 2/3 of those cows. So those Holstein and Jersey cows that they're not going to use to make replacements, we're putting either Angus, Sim-Angus, Limousin, or Charolais semen in those cows for the most part to create this half dairy, half beef animal. They still are not as good as a native beef animal, but we do really improve them from a feed efficiency, muscling, and then the dairy breeds inherently are good for marbling, so they're generally high grading cattle. So we're improving on a product that has probably not been a premium product in the marketplace before.
Right, and a lot of producers might ask you, why don't you just bring in an Angus bull to that operation?
Yeah, well, and so dairy producers, one, are not used to running bulls, and two, the neat thing is that they're using some really elite terminal genetics at this point, and most dairy producers already are very good at implementing AI as a technology.
So as beef producers, what does this trend mean to them?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see happen is, we talked a lot about traceability for honestly the last 10 years. We've seen a little bit more of it the last 2 or 3. But I think the beef on dairy supply chains that are being developed are really going to get good at traceability, and I think it's going to force the question is why do we not do that as beef producers? Mm-hmm. So I think the first trend we'll see happen is I think we will see improved traceability in the traditional beef industry. I think it will also probably challenge us to continue to improve the genetics on the beef on beef animals to remain ahead of where these beef on dairy animals get from a genetic and value proposition to our industry.
Now, I also kind of want to segment this into two groups here. What does it look like for the future of commercial and then seed stock producers?
Yes. So for commercial producers, I think it's very important that you have a genetic plan, because what is going to happen is the feed yards and the packers are going to look at these beef on dairy animals is what is the lowest quality animal in my system today that I can replace with these beef on dairy. And so there's going to be pressure that average is going to continue to move up. And so as a commercial producer, you need to have a genetic plan. And I think you have to have a targeted market that you're really trying to aim at and get very specific in the genetics that you use so that you can hopefully maximize the value into that market that you choose to participate in. In terms of seed stock producers, I think we're going to see some consolidation in that segment of our industry because it's going to get more expensive to be a seed stock producer. You're going to have to utilize a lot of these genetic and reproductive technologies we talked about this morning. So it's going to be a pretty capital intensive business, which makes it hard for smaller producers. And then I think it's also going forward, it's going to be very important for seed stock producers to create market access for their customers' cattle, which costs money. And so I think what will happen is we will see smaller producers either go together or tie to a bigger producer, and you'll have more of these kind of cooperative marketing type of arrangements. I think the seed stock business is going to get more competitive because of all the technology we have available. Those that adopt it are going to be able to move at a really fast pace, and that's what we've seen happen on the seed stock dairy side of our business.
Remarks there from one of the featured speakers at the 2020 Cattlemen's Day at K-State from Select Sires, Vice President of Beef Programs Lorna Marshall, talking with Britton Rucker about contemporary advances in beef genetics. We'll be back with more on this Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. We're back now on Agriculture Today, and now for you, a profile of another of the 6 Kansas farm and ranch couples who will be formally honored later this week as members of the 2019 class of Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers. Again, it's a long-standing recognition program co-sponsored by K-State Research and Extension and Kansas Farmer Magazine. It's not an easy thing building upon a legacy, but that's exactly what Mark and Eva Gardiner have done. Mark is the 4th generation of Gardiners to ranch near Ashland in Clark County, southwest Kansas. In 2000, he took over the management of Gardiner Angus Ranch from his parents, Henry and Nan, who were national and international pace setters in genetic improvement in the Angus breed over their ranching lives. Brothers Greg and Garth are also active partners in the operation now. Mark and Eva met at Kansas State University, where Mark earned his animal science degree in 1983. Eva was just finishing up her veterinary studies at K-State, and she has put those cattle health skills to work in managing the ranch side by side with Mark. It has doubled in size under their watch, now spanning 48,000 acres. The Gardiners also make time to engage in the Ashland community, which was never more evident than in the aftermath of the massive Starbuck wildfire that overran Clark and surrounding counties in March 2017. Gardiner Angus Ranch was not spared the devastation, but the resiliency of the Gardiners has won out. Since Mark and Eva assumed management, the ranch has become one of the largest AI embryo beef operations in the world.
My grandfather, Ralph Gardiner, was born in a dugout Henry Clay Gardiner came here in a caravan of wagons with 7 other families here in 1885. And Ralph Gardiner was born in that dugout, which was a hole in the ground, in 1889, and that was a part of the Homestead Act. Ralph didn't get married till he was 43, so Henry Gardiner was born in 1931. Dad graduated from high school in 1949, and he went to Kansas State University. And that was at the advent of artificial insemination when that was first being started, and he learned how to artificially inseminate cattle. You know, some of the techniques back then weren't as good, and he worked on that. And in 1964, Mom and Dad at that point in time made the decision to become total AI without the use of cleanup bulls, which that was pretty revolutionary back then to be total AI, and it was just Henry, Nan, and at that point just 2 little boys. You know, since that point in time, we have used that technology and subsequent technologies, the partnership to get better, especially with Kansas State. We've done numerous research projects with Kansas State. You know, we'd milk cows, we'd do serving capacity, libido tests on bulls, and all synchronization studies. And that partnership, and for Gardiner Angus Ranch, those technologies, and I won't get off in the weeds of database selection systems, but that is what made Gardiner Angus Ranch a genetics business that it is today.
Eva, your background, were you on a ranch growing up? What was the story there?
No, I wasn't. My father was a pilot in the Air Force. My parents are both from eastern Kansas, Gardiner, Kansas.
How ironic, of course.
Yes, without the I.
Spelled differently.
But anyway, so both my parents are from farms, and every summer wherever we lived, I was actually born in France, and we traveled, and lived different places across the United States. But in the summer, I'd spend my summers on my grandparents' farm, and my dad's family raised quarter horses, so that's where I was most of the time in the summer growing up. And I don't ever remember a time when I didn't want to go to veterinary school, and so I'd always had Kansas State in mind to do that, and I came to K-State after I graduated from high school in Virginia, and I got my residency and applied and got in, and I was working at the beef barn in the horse unit during school.
And you finished that DVM at K-State then? I
did my bachelor's DVM and then my master's.
Again, your father had certainly established the ranch nationally, internationally at that point. What was the game plan in your mind to take it the next step, Mark?
I always get to visit with folks, and we talk about what we're trying to do. And I was just, and still am, infatuated with making beef cattle better. That's all I was going to do. And so Dad gave me lots of responsibility, and I was a data nerd. I mean, we talked about what brought us from reproduction of artificial insemination to the best linear unbiased predictions that were made available to us in the fall of 1980 that made this ranch be able to grow. And so I worked as hard as I could at making cattle better. And we had been total AI since 1964. We became, in 1987, we started doing embryo transfer. The bottom line is we use superior bulls and we select superior cows, and we make those cattle better for the traits of merit. What I've learned, and I guess it would be 37 years since I've been home from K-State now, is it's people first. We've worked hard on customer service. We sold our very first bull for over $1,000, and we're in our very first sale in 1980. I used to tease Dad, well, you didn't sell them for more than $1,000 because you didn't ask for more than $1,000. He'd say, oh, they weren't very good, this or that. And our very first sale averaged about $1,200 in 1980, and that was one of the great days we ever had. But we kept working at taking care of that, and we sold 52 bulls in that first sale. Today we sell a little over 2,600 bulls, but even when we were only selling 50 bulls, Henry's rules, the golden rule was, if you have a problem, we're going to take care of it. So part of the customer service, if a bull breaks down, we'll replace it or give you credit, whichever you choose. And I spend a lot of time of every day to day helping people with their problems, solving some issues, whether it be with breeding. I spend a lot of time marketing their cattle, and so when all I wanted to do was breed the best cattle I could, that's the easiest thing I do, and I still am thrilled to do it. But that's not the most important thing. It's taking care of customers, taking care of people, making sure that they are successful, helping them achieve their goals. Because if we can both achieve those things, then we both have the opportunity to be, as the cool word today is, sustainable.
We don't want to overlook, though, and bring you and Eva to speak to this a bit, that you have also been extraordinarily supportive of your community through various means, including the Community Foundation for Ashland and so forth.
Well, after the fire in 2017, and I really wanted to focus more on something to be involved with in the community where I could actually feel like, okay, I personally am involved in a foundation or organization to where I feel like I can at least attempt to give back some of what, a part of what was given to us and all that. So I was able to get on the board of the Ashland Community Foundation, and that's been a real blessing to me, and to be able to nationally get information on things occurring like the flooding in Nebraska and Iowa and we were able to help out with that, and just being able to communicate with the people who are actually doing the footwork for that and just kind of see behind the scenes. So that's been really, I just would like to contribute more. And Ashland, as a small town, rural community, we have a really good base of organizations that really pay it forward and want to reach out and help. So I think that's a really unique thing, and we have learned from other rural small town communities, their community foundations. It kind of makes you actually more connected in a way, and there's a network. Being part of that network is really fulfilling, I guess.
Well, and the community foundation ended up being the conduit for people to help us. Many people know about the Starbuck fire of 2017, and it burned 85% of our community, and it was devastating. We've always tried to be present. We've always tried to pay it forward, and you always ask, have we done enough? And then when you see what people did for us, us is the Clark County community, the Ashland community, where 30-some houses were burned and 10,000 cattle were killed, and all of the fences were destroyed, and all of us said, we don't know how we're going to go about doing this, but we will. And, God sent a lot of amazing people to help us. I'm not talking about there were 4 or 5 people that showed up. There were hundreds of people that showed up for weeks and weeks and even into the summer and, rebuilt. I mean, we lost 270 miles of fence, and I know what fence costs to rebuild, brand new, and I'm going, we'll be lucky to get this back in 10 years. But what they did and what American agriculture did, we can never repay that. Mm-mm. This is an amazing award, but it's not about Eva and I. It's about what we can do to make this place better than we found it. And I think that's the Kansas State way. I think that's the American agriculture way. And we certainly try to make sure that that's our family's way.
Mark and Eva Gardiner of Clark County. On tomorrow's broadcast, we'll tell you the stories of 2 more couples in this latest Kansas Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker class, they being Doug and Sandra McGraw of Finney County and David and Janet Olson of Brown County. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
We're back now on Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Once more, we set time aside every other Tuesday to pass along the latest from your Farm Service Agency, state headquarters for Kansas, calling this FSA Coffee Talk. Joining us now is the Public Relations and Outreach Coordinator for the state office, Kitra Cooper, with a handful of things that we'll cover here today, Kitra. The first of which is going to be an outreach effort coming up very soon. put on by the state FSA office, what you're calling grassroots roundtable meetings across the state. What are these about?
This is just a way that we're hoping to connect with our producers and our ag partners. It's not just for producers. We're hoping other ag community members out across the state join these meetings as well. But we wanted to get out where they are, come to the communities, have it be a casual, one-on-one opportunity for them to just briefly hear what's going on with FSA, and then we're going to open it up to whatever questions they want to ask.
Whatever topic is on their minds in regard to USDA programs will be fair game then.
Sure.
It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. And we hope they come with armed with whatever issues they've had over the last year or so, what questions they might have about programs coming up, and really just spend a few minutes, a little bit of time getting to know their state office leadership. We know that they're familiar and well-known and comfortable with their county office employees, but we want them to know who we are as well. And
you've lined up several locations at which these will take place, Kitra.
Yes, we tried to do it kind of on a per-district basis. So we've got 7 locations. It was a little hard to pin down open dates, so we're kind of scattered from March into April, but we do have those dates and locations pinned down.
Here are the dates and locations for these FSA Grassroots Roundtable meetings. Tuesday, March the 24th, Greensburg. Wednesday, March 25th in Garden City. And then in April, the 14th of April in Colby, Tuesday. Wednesday the 15th, then the following day in Hayes. And then Thursday the 16th, same week, in Rossville. The last 2 of these, Tuesday, April the 28th in Chanute, and Wednesday, April the 29th in Wichita. But this is casual. Producers, do they need to pre-register for these or just show up?
They just show up. We're going to start a pretty strong publicity campaign here pretty soon, so they should be able to have all this information in their hands as far as actual location, meeting rooms, addresses, time of the meetings. We're going to get all that pushed out here pretty quick.
And local FSA offices will be fully briefed on all of that.
Yes, so absolutely.
Keep that in mind, but be sure to take advantage of this first-of-its-kind opportunity to join a local grassroots roundtable meeting covering FSA topics at those 7 locations in Kansas over the next several weeks. Other things that the FSA is up to right now, you're going through the training for the new county FSA committee members, you say, Kitra.
Yes, we do this every year. County committee election occurs in November and December of each year, and we put on, usually around 50 or so new members and advisors each year, and they have to be trained. So we plan a series of orientation meetings across the state. Again, we've got 3 locations going. We were in Great Bend last week. We talk about things like duties and responsibilities, kind of chain of command. If county committee has a question or an issue in a county office, who do they go to? There are a lot of ethics and conflict of interest rules we review. We just want to make sure they're comfortable with the job that they have to do.
This is a standard procedure for those county committee members, the new members. So
yes,
it's very important that they be up to speed on procedure.
Yep. That's true.
And you have more of those coming up, you say, those trainings?
Yes, we do. In Emporia, we'll be training kind of the eastern side of the state, and then we jog over to Scott City on Thursday and train the western side.
So you canvass the entire state eventually.
Yes, we do.
All of that. But we do want to finish with one matter of program business. This coming Monday is the final day for producers to make their elections on which farm program option for their crop production they'll opt for. That is the ARC or the PLC choice. It's been talked about ad nauseum, but one more time, Kitra, you wanted to bring that to producers' attention.
Yes, I just want to make sure everybody's had the opportunity to contact their county office and make an appointment. I'm sure we've got some counties running registers due to the number of producers that we're trying to get in the door at the same time. But they have got to contact the office by Monday to at least get on the register to get enrolled for 2019. If they don't do that, they will not be eligible for payment.
Very important business to get taken care of. Always a pleasure to have you over, and we will welcome you back soon.
Thank you,
very much,
Eric.
Kitra, for being with us. She is the Public Relations and Outreach Coordinator with the Farm Service Agency State Headquarters for Kansas. Kitra Cooper with us. Now here's K-State Dairy Specialist Mike Brook with this week's edition of Milk Lines. Mike?
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning your herd today. What % of the herd is pregnant, and how many days in milk on average are your cows? You know, as we get lactation stretched out further, and when we start to see average days in milk for our herd rise above, say, 180, we generally see a very significant drop in milk production per cow, as well as the amount of milk that we're shipping off the farm every day. Really, this is controlled by our reproduction efficiency early in lactation. As we push that number back to, say, closer to 150, we see that the herd generally has an increase in milk production. If you look at the difference in your herd when you were at 150 days in milk average versus 180, one of the things you probably realize is that there's been a difference in the number of days open. As the number of days open increases, in other words, our reproductive efficiency has dropped on the dairy, that will generally lead to an increase in the average days in milk at a future date. So one of the primary things you need to be thinking about is heat stress as we start to move into the spring and summer season. It's not just heat stress that's associated with our lactating cows, it's heat stress on our pre-fresh cows as well as dry cows. So, time to clean our fans that we have. It's time to start checking out those sprinkler systems and soaking systems that we use to put some water on those cows at the feed line, making sure that everything's in tip-top shape so that when heat stress does arrive, that we can help the cows combat the effects of that. That will help improve our conception percentages and also reduce the number of days to first service or conception with our herds. In general, this should help us lower the average days that animals are open in the current lactation, leading to a more efficient herd in the next year. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to carefully consider how reproduction is affecting their herd and how that might affect future milk production.
Thanks, Mike, and you're listening to Agriculture Today.
For information on threatening weather, you should depend on the National Weather Service and their broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is an all-hazards radio network that provides up-to-the-minute weather information, including life-saving warnings anytime, day or night. NOAA Weather Radio also broadcasts information on man-made disasters, such as chemical spills, amber alerts, or other national emergencies. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
Concluding this Agriculture Today, it's our weekly wildlife management segment. As along once more is wildlife specialist Charlie Lee of K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, you're going to fill us in today on a protectant product against wildlife damage to crop seed. It's been around a while. It's been the subject of research recently. It's called anthraquinone. Talk about this compound, what it is.
Well, we've had attempts to protect agricultural crops from rodents and invertebrate pests for many, many years. There is some information that the Native Americans were using seed extracts as chemical repellents to protect corn seed from birds as early as the mid-1700s. There's been a lot of natural and synthetic chemicals that have been evaluated on their effectiveness at being a repellent for birds and mammals and insects. But anthraquinone is a quinone derivative of anthracene, which is found in dyes and pigments of many plants, and it's been used for many years, actually. They've used some of it as early as 1900s. They started using anthraquinone as late as 1940s on green finches, a European bird. So it was patented for the first time in 1943. The mode of action of anthraquinone is to cause post-ingestional distress. It's an emetic product, and the birds that eat the product or ingest the product then get an emetic response produced because of irritation in the gut. But the actual mechanism of why that differs from regurgitation, which is very common in birds, is really not very clear. But they do know that post-ingestional distress occurs from eating products that have been coated with anthraquinone, and that results in a conditioned avoidance to that particular food type.
It's not a lethal compound, then? It's not a toxicant or anything of the sort?
This is not a toxicant. This is a repellent. It's been used on food crops. In fact, it's been used on many, many different products: corn, rice, sunflowers, including confectionery sunflowers, wheat, millet, oats, and sorghum, and then used on some other products, including granular pesticides and rodenticide baits in various forms. It's been used on structures. It's a product that's just never really received widespread interest. There's still not any data on cost to speak of. There's a commercial product for birds. It's not registered in all locations. I don't see many producers using the product. But there's been a renewed interest in sampling the product because nothing else is labeled.
You say, though, there has been of late a recent test of the product against mammals that might feed on seed in the ground, presumably?
Yes, this is a product that's been used for mammals, but not just product in the ground. It's also been used on structures. Okay. There's some interest in using the anthraquinone as a spray-on for plastic hoses, drip lines for irrigation, and the data seems to show that it's got some effectiveness. The study that was done in California in conjunction with the USDA Wildlife Service research labs showed that it was a fairly effective product. They used the anthraquinone-based repellent on voles and on Richardson ground squirrels, deer mice, and cottontail rabbits. They used it in captivity, where they noticed a 50 to 56% feeding repellency on whole oats. Then they increased the concentration, got a little bit better, up to 85% repellency on voles and rabbits. So, when you've got an 85% effective product, that's a pretty good product. We've got others that have been tested with much lower levels of efficacy, and it does the same type of response in mammals as it does in birds. It has that post-ingestive consequences, hopefully that they eventually learn to be conditioned to avoid that particular food type. There's also some interest in probably trying to improve the effectiveness by the use of that product because it also absorbs ultraviolet wavelengths that are visible to most wild birds. Most mammals are not able to see ultraviolet, but many birds are. And the strategy seems to be to develop an application for the product to modify the behavior of pests, including birds, so that all products would not have to be treated. Perhaps they would learn to avoid those that would just show the ultraviolet reflectance as compared to both the ultraviolet and the anthraquinone product. So the combination seems to be the subject to most of the research currently.
So anthraquinone appears to be the answer to what can, at times, be a costly problem for crop producers, but once more is underemployed out there?
Well, I think we are lacking in effective cropland tools to prevent both birds and mammals from ingesting newly planted seeds. We've talked several times in the past about the problems in voles and newly planted corn and milo. We've also had problems with rodents, primarily voles, in soybeans. So the need is there. The efficacy is still not ideal. The costs are something that will have to be worked out by the markets. We don't have any options or very many options for using toxicants in cropland situations. So, yes, I think this is a product that could eventually play a large role.
And once more, as Charlie said, it's been around for quite some time, anthraquinone, and it does have promise as a way to, again, ward wildlife away from crop seed in the ground. And it's gone through some recent research lately to try to weigh its effectiveness once more. And we appreciate the report on what we know to date about it. Charlie, he is wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. That wraps up another Tuesday edition. Please do, if you haven't already, check out our podcast service where you can hear our broadcast on demand anytime you'd like or have it downloaded automatically to your mobile device. Information on those options can be found at agtoday.net. That's agtoday.net. Meantime, please rejoin us right here this same time tomorrow. Until then, and for Britton Rucker, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.